Hello, everyone. This is Chapter 1 Excel Essentials, and we're going to be diving through how to do analysis, how to do initial data scoping, and also how to do some data quality assurance in Excel today. Really, just to unlock some data insights that you can find initially just by looking at it. So, first, what are some initial steps of data handling in an Excel? Uh, These are sort of the steps that I take whenever I handle data at work initially. A lot of people, a lot of companies, when I ask for sample data before actual full data comes in through the database, they often give you an Excel, and you get to really do three steps. You're going to be having some success with getting a better understanding of the data. First one is data assessment. Data assessment is just simply looking at the data. It doesn't require a lot of skills, but it does require a lot of sort of your understanding of the data and then the initial insights and tendencies. So first one, you just sort of look at the data and say, oh, this is a time series data, or maybe this is just categorical data, or maybe this data has to be joined with other data to be insightful. Oftentimes I look at with graphs and charts initially, not in detail, just to see if there's any anomalies, inconsistencies, and actually that flows over to the data quality assurance. And I always say these two go hand by hand, just because when you look at some data and actually data errors sort of pop out to your eyes and say, oh, actually, there's something going on with this data and I need to fix those things. So, data quality, another thing that I'm going to mention is extremely important. There's so many data problems out in the world that not necessarily having the right solution for it. You can be creative when it comes to data, just because some numbers can be off, some text can be off, maybe the format can be off, and there's something that comes with innately within the Excel that can sort of also screw things up too. So we're going to be walking those through. And last one is data profiling. This is sort of a summary of the data to see, hey, this data has a correlation of something something and also have basic statistics of mean value, maximum value, average value, and maybe you want to normalize it in Excel and say that you z-score normalize and say these are the sort of what data looks like because of what extreme value we had to normalize it in z-score. So it's just to say you having a better understanding of the data sets, and by the end of this you should be able to get, okay, this is how I'm going to scope out, this is how I'm going to be connecting those data points later on. So before we dive in, let's take a brief look at our data. First one is movie attribute. It's just a comprehensive data about each movie, including genre, rating, box office opening, other sort of relevant characteristics. And Google search, we're going to be diving deeper into this one just because it's very important. I think when it comes to media or any type of entertainment industry, you're going to come across this data because it's naturally very correlated to box office. And not only that, it's correlated to all the other metrics too. So we're going to be taking a look at that one. And social performance, this is about audience interaction with movie related to content on social media. There's a lot of metrics like trailer views and shares and follower growth, website traffic, and all that. But we're not going to be using all of those in Tableau and later on in the project, but we are going to be looking at it in the lens of QA and data assessment. Social listening, this is just a Twitter volume, sort of looking at the organic mentions and sentiment polarity, positive, sort of negative, neutral. It's sort of a helpful additional information that can be pasted on top of some of the things that we're going to be looking at. So on that note, let's take a look at our example. Okay, so this is movie attribute data, and then it has a lot of different stuff here. You can see sort of a box office information, title name. I know there's only 5 lines of items. Usually there will be thousands. I think our studio is probably dealing with about 2 to 3 thousand movies, so because we had a long database. But we narrowed down to horror movies that are sort of close to each other when it comes to box office. That's why you're seeing only just a small amount of small numbers of rows here. Let me give you a quick rundown of this database, just because it's gonna be the sort of ground base, and it's gonna be a map that's gonna be connecting all the other data points. Title name, initial day of the week. A lot of things are intuitive: genre and season, cumulative box office, and the distribution name, and also ratings and other titles too. First one, the one that I do want to point out is IMDb title CD. This is actually the data that industry uses a lot. I think all the studios use pretty much the same naming convention when it comes to the name tag, which is IMDb title code is actually unique for each movie and TV show. So if you're going to be working in the industry, this is sort of the data set you can kind of show off as, hey, I know that you guys sort of use the IMDb codes in the database. I know a little bit about that. I've worked with it. So that's a good aspect. Initially, just looking at it, I don't know if you guys see any data problems or errors in this case. I personally don't. Things seem to be okay, but I would double check in some cases. To see if there's typo or anything. So first of all, the best step is filter everything, just because that gives you a quick glance of what values are within the column. This is sort of really quick way to see if there's any errors. And one of the column that I'll point out is actually here. There should be only 3 entries or 3 different types of studios, but I'm also seeing Universal and Universal, and that's typo that's really sneaky that can sneak up on you. And if you just ignore it later down the road, it would be sort of an additional data point that you have to go all the way back to Excel or SQL to fix things up. So in this case, I'll just simply copy it over and then fix it. If not, the alternative is actually doing the find and replace by Control F button. If you press those at the same time, this window will pop up and you'll actually can type in what value you want to find, what value you want to replace it with, and you can just do that. And of course, it gives you an error just because I changed everything, but that's another way. So that is it for this data. There's nothing actually much to do. So let's hop on to the next one. So on to next one, which is search data that I previously mentioned that it's very important and very correlative. So let's look at this data. Initial look at this data. Let's enlarge this columns. There's title name, release date, IMDb ID, which is the same thing as IMDb title code. We're going to be dealing with the alias and everything in the sequel, but we're just going to keep it as it is here now. Data date, date release to date. So this is probably calculated based on when this movie released and also the relative to when the data date was. So it's sort of standardized across the board for all titles. And there's a search volume per all the days that are in. So this is a really a time series data that are continuous values. So let's start with the Q8 first. How about that? First of all, this is a lot of rows. So let's see Control Shift right and then down to see how far this data goes. And it goes all the way to 1122, which is pretty sizable in this case. The first thing we're going to do, just like I mentioned in attribute, we're going to look at filter to see what's going on. So title name, seems everything is fine. Release date, looks like everything is all right. There's about 4 entries, 5 entries. There's still good. Oops, there's something going on in this title code. This time it's not so simple, just like Universal, Universal. I don't know which code is right. So what do I do about this? The best solution is create a pivot table. Pivot table is always going to give you a sort of a straight answer right away. So for this one, we want to look at what's the right TT code, or do we say IMDb title code? We're going to place the title name, and then we're going to put the IMDb code, and then we're going to look at, let's say, search volume, but we're not going to look at the raw search volume just because that's not the purpose of it. So we're going to shift this up to count to see how many search volumes go to those. It looks like these all are the faulty ones. Better ways to look at it, I guess, in this sense, is if I were to shift title name here, then I guess this is a cleaner way of looking at it. So these and then these are the wrong ones. I'm just copying and pasting so that we can QA this rather quickly. So previously I mentioned about the search thing. This is where we're going to use replace and find. So let's find this TT code, replace with this TT code, replace all. We made adjustment. Even this got changed. And we're going to change this one with this one, replace all. We're going to find that one with this. replace all, last one, find this one, and with this one. Sorry, I might have made a mistake there. Yeah, so that should be it. And let's take a look. Let's delete that for keeping it clean. You notice that pivot table is not updating, even though we sort of changed those values. So what we're going to do is actually refresh this pivot table. Boom. Oh, we actually missed this one out. So let's do that again. So let's go back, clean that up, copy and clean it over. And then we're going to do the same thing. Replace, copy that over. That's the right TT code. And this is the wrong TT code. So replace all, make two adjustments, and that should be pretty much it. And let's see and refresh that again. Boom. So that's cleaned up a little bit. And then the second thing, what we're going to do is I don't think there's anything else. Well, glaring right here, it seems to be outlier, that's standing value. So let's check that real quick. Just one day, the only one that has 1,600. So delete these immediately. We don't want those outliers whatsoever. So let's see all the other things. I don't see any other sort of a glaring issues. Those might be outliers based on what I see. The only thing I'm gonna do is this remove duplicate. You can look it up here and you can also see it in the data section. There's some other helpful functions that you can use, but I would see remove duplicates to see if there's any duplicate columns or rows that are existing in here. We're going to select all of these just to make sure and click. Seems like there were some duplicate data and we removed the 9 out of 1,112. So this data seems to be more or less clean now. So how about this? Let's take a look at the data to see how it actually trends. I'm going to do line graph by the title name, by the release date. So we can see the beautiful line graph of like the 90 days out where the search is and all the way to 0 day, which is the release date to see how the search volume evolves per title. Insert, we're going to go with the line chart right here. And this is not what we want. Sometimes Excel makes these sort of default functions, which chooses what it wants to use it as a x-axis and the y-axis. And for you to fix this, it sometimes takes more effort and energy than you want it to be. So again, the solution when it comes to these things, default to pivot table. So let's go back to pivot table, shall we? So this time we don't really care about count of search table. And so we're going to look at it by, we don't really need IMDb title ID either because we're not queuing the data. We just need a column. And let's make our rows be days to release. We're still seeing that value. We just need to refresh that and voila, and it's gone. And then the search volume right here. And we're going to create line graph right here. Boom, boom. See, we have a correct line graph. And just at a first sight, I am noticing some erroneous data points. This doesn't seem usual given the level of the data and other dates. And you can see that there's a little spike that's happening right here. But it's trailing down, which is showing sort of the natural decline. But these two seem a little bit out of the place. So we're going to take a look at those data points specifically. So that's Megan and the black phone. So in this case, let's restructure our pivot table just a little bit. Line graph can go away a little bit. So title name, and then we're going to look at the max search data. So they look wrong. So you can see Smile is 5, Black Front's 35, and Boomerang is 3 and 1. So these are definitely wrong. So we're going to take these values and actually find out where they are. And we're going to replace those things with other sort of impute data. So these two values, how do we find it? Can we just simply find, replace and find? You could do that, but let me show you the other solution. When you're doing sort of a macro job with finding different values in especially array uh, data, you don't want to do just find and replace. That's very um, requires a lot of manual work and time. So in this case, we're going to use if statement. We're going to be using sort of a conditional statement that qualifies for two conditions. It has to match our title and it has to match our data value. So, and we're going to go with or in this case, which should say it has to match either or of these two. So let me show you step by step. So A2, which is our sort of value right there. And then this is our target value is let's fix that just because we don't want the value to change a lot. And then we're going to do A2 again equals to this one. And we're going to fix that too, just because we don't want that value to change either. Or just capitalize as my little pet peeve just to make sure that everything is working correctly. F2 is our search volume, making sure that it matches this data. Or it's matching up this data. And then we're going to close parentheses twice. And then if it matches, we're going to give it, let's say, delete. Else, oops. Else, we're going to say keep. All right, so keep. We're going to copy that over. We're going to just name this validate. And then we're just going to use the filter function just to we can keep it. And then we're going to find delete. Yep. So there they are. Our functions that are columns that are a little bit wrong. So what we're going to do is we are not going to completely delete the rows because it's continuous values and it's happening in 99 days before, 285 days before. What we're going to do is just delete the search volume. And we're going to impute this data. Basically, there's many ways of doing this. But in this case, there's only two data points and we don't really need to go really crazy with this. We can just go ahead and impute based on the previous data and then also the forward data and then sort of average those two out. So let's go back. So in that case, let's filter it down to Megan alone and then organize by this. And then there's this. We're just going to be averaging those out. So that's a valid data, but make sure it's not a living as a function just because sometimes it will mess things up. So make sure to control C copy and then control C, the control shift and V, and then make sure it's an actual value rather than a formula because we're going to be connecting this data later on. And then the later one is black film. So let's do that. And I think the data was somewhere here. So we're just going to do the same thing. Average between this data and then the low and then boom. And there's the actual number. To keep the data clean, we're going to be deleting unnecessary data points. We don't need the validation anymore. So we're going to go back to pivot table and let's look at our data. Let's look at what the data looks like again. So with the line chart that we saw earlier, so this is max. Rather than the max, we want to see sum and then also see date to release right here. And it's the same format that we had before. And this is because it's not refreshed yet. We refresh it, boom, look at that. Look at the chart. So that's sort of a normal search trend. It goes up when the trailer goes out. This is most likely when the trailer happened, and then it just comes back down to the natural level. And probably all the other ones are similar. So just by looking at this, you can see the Megan 3 probably had a really big trailer launch, and then it trailed down. eventually leading up to the successful sort of a closer to the release date search data. This is a good proxy of just seeing how popular the movie will be, because this is really based on people searching up the movie rather than people talking about the movie. And my common behavior too is when I'm interested in the movie, I just look it up on Google, and this all goes into this data. We're not going into detail, but you can look at this data by city and state, and also by different countries. So there's a lot of things that can be done within this data. And it's good to see sort of this kind of value. And let's also see, now that I'm curious, what actually has a lot of search data. So let's ditch this data graph and then just look at sort of the summaries of things. So we remove that and look at the total sum of it. And you can just by looking at it, the platform has the most search volume out of all, which is pretty healthy. And Megan closely following, Barbarian not as close as the other one, sort of seeing the not as popular as other movies. And you know what? Might as well let's look at some other sort of statistical value of this thing. So that's a sum. And then we're going to be looking at, let's look at average search volume. Pretty consistent, but Black Phone's average search volume being small, which kind of shows how that later on in the campaign, especially closer to the release, the search volume probably exploded given how the average search volume is actually below Smile. And other one would be where you look at min max, and so I'm not going to take a look at that. Let's look at standard deviation. Um, Make sure to be familiar with this. I'm pretty sure you guys all know about basic statistics, but standard deviation in short kind of tells you how narrow or wide the data is. So in this case, the smaller the volume or smaller the standard deviation is, that means the tighter the distribution is. So Barbarian, not probably seeing a lot of sort of value change over the time, but Smile seeing a lot. So they're probably saying, even without looking at min max, there's probably a big difference between the sort of a day-to-day growth. So why not just we take a look at that? I know I just said we're not going to be taking a look at minimum and maximum. So let's set this one as minimum. Let's set this one as maximum. So boom, you look at the start difference between sort of a minimum value and then the maximum value almost to 0 to 5, which kind of hints at the fact that the standard deviation is big because the data is wide, then average search volume is big, and but then the sum of the search volume is not as big as this. So this kind of story is what I was talking about in regards to data and having a story. You just get a glimpse of this. We're going to dive deeper into this really in Tableau when we get to actually play with the data and the visual elements. But this is sort of an initial quick way of looking at the data. So next time we're going to be looking at other data, the social data and the social listening data. And then we're going to be looking at that from a data profiling perspective of just looking at correlations and other sort of a high overall summary of those data rather than the QAing those. But thank you for watching this. Hi, welcome back, everyone. I know we looked through movie attribute and Google search through Excel last time, sort of going through one by one, mainly looking at what kind of data problems they can have and how to go about fixing those things. This time, we're going to be looking at the mostly social listening data that's on the far right. And then social performance, I would sort of leave this up to you guys to sort of explore based on what we do today with the social listening. And just an overview and a recap of what that data has. That data includes a lot of sort of Twitter related volumes and organic mentions, sentiment polarity, Twitter or X, I guess, in this case. So we're going to be going through that today and then show you sort of all the steps that we took last week, but a little bit more in depth and also going further into the data profiling. And let me give you a quick recap of what are those primary steps are when it comes to Excel. Data assessment, really the purpose is to get a high level overview of the data set. We really want to understand sort of the data structure, content, and potential uses. This is when you sort of brainstorm. And some of the techniques that could be used, first of all, these techniques could be used for any of these three stages. I just want to iterate that. But these are the sort of things that I use for specifically data assessment a lot of time when it comes to the new data that I receive. So some of it is conditional formatting, basic statistics, and filtering and pivot table. Although, like I said last time, pivot table is sort of for everything. So just to keep in mind that. We also did this one last time, and I sort of emphasized this a lot in terms of how much time we're going to be spending doing this data quality assurance. I know we're doing this with Excel, but we're going to be doing this with SQL. We're going to be doing this with Tableau. It's an ongoing thing because every process is sort of like water filter. Water filter has like about 6, 7 layers, and each layer sort of filters through specific how would you call chemicals. But in this case, for us, Excel, you sort of look at the overview of what the problems are. SQL get a little bit more specific. Tableau gets a little bit more specific from SQL. So that's kind of the funnels that we're going to be going through. And just like it's correcting errors and inconsistencies and also inaccuracies in the data. And also just to make sure that the data is reliable and accurate for analysis. And also, I think the biggest thing is also detecting outliers in this case. Applicable techniques are data validation, find and replace, removing duplicates, and error handling. The last one, this is sort of the hero of today, data profiling. I think data assessment, data quality assurance sort of all build up to this point, just to really build. Now we got understanding of the data set. Now we got the correct data and consistent data in our hands, and we can really make charts and small dashboard. And that's our goal today, of the data that we have, and then just showcasing the brief things that we could look at in Excel. A lot of things, sort of continuous values, and the filtering through those things like Tableau. It's not as fluent as Tableau, but things could be done here. So I'm going to be showing you that today. And some of the main techniques that are going to be used today are charts and graphs, statistical functions. I'm going to be briefly showing you this, I think, through a pivot table, but I'm also going to show you this through a SQL where all the data could be joined and seeing these at the same time. Last one is formula and function. VLOOKUP, extremely important. You probably know, but I'm just going to show you how it can be done at the workplace through the actual real data. So let's dive into it. So here is our data, social listening data with all the Twitter data. It might look a little bit messy and you're seeing a whole bunch of Twitter stuff. So, before we do anything, let's make sure to see what we have in here. There's a lot going on with IMDb ID that I mentioned last week. Title name, release date of the movie, date of the data, days to release, and then I think it's all sort of Twitter metrics, negative, neutral, organic volume, negative percent, neutral percent. Okay, so let's go back just to see everything at once. We're going to be taking the same steps as last time. We're going to make sure that the data is okay to look at before we do anything. So just like last time, let's go through some steps to make sure the data is okay. First one, we're going to check the duplicates. So making sure that there's no duplicate in our data. Make sure everything is chosen. My data has headers because it's not recognizing it. And I think these are just picked even though there's no data. So let's uncheck those things. And we have everything. And click. No duplicate data found. So that is good. And then next step that I mentioned was also checking to make sure that there's no, I think there is some empty data here. Let's just clear the content and make sure that there's nothing that appears here. Right? So we're dealing with 5 different movies. So this is good to see that there's 5 different TT codes that are sort of unique. Doesn't look like there's any issues with these. Title name, we got 5 movies. Not seeing any particular typo or anything like that. Release date, we need to see also 5 dates since there's 5 movies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That seems to be okay. We're not going to check this because at a glance, it seems to be okay and everything is so Twitter data. Um, Before I jump right in, one thing I'm going to do to make sure is I do not like seeing a lot of decimals. So these that we see, I think up to 5 decimals, let's just make sure that we don't see these messy numbers. It's probably we're not selecting the numbers. Let's do that. And then let's make sure. Oh, click the wrong thing. I think up to 1 decimal, it's okay. And these are sort of percentages, and to be honest, we might not even need a decimal, but let's just keep it at 1 decimal in this case for now. Um, and now data seems to be a little bit more clean. Um, I don't see anything majorly wrong. So what we're gonna do first is all these names that we have. We're gonna simplify these things because if you're actually working with someone else, and in most cases at bigger corporates and stuff, you're gonna be sharing this data with people, and I don't think in most cases people like to see all these long names of columns. So we're gonna bring these over as sort of like a lookup table and change these and then simplify these based on sort of the regular practice. First of all, we want to get rid of all the Twitter. We don't want all the Twitter stuff here. It's kind of obvious that we're dealing with the Twitter data as a whole, so we do not need to repeat in column saying Twitter something, Twitter something, Twitter something. So in this case, let's simplify total volume. VOL. I think in any cases, people immediately recognize that it's volume, and then total. It can be shortened as TOT in this case. And this one, I think, can be organic volume. This one, let's say negative, neutral, new, pause. Now this is more of a nested one. I guess there's like 3 different things that are happening. Negative organic volume. So make sure neg or vol, much shorter, isn't it? So new or vol, pause or vol, neg percent. We can do that. New percent and a positive percent. All right, so we got aliases that are much shorter than these. So let's put these back into place. And just make sure, I guess I didn't explain long enough. When I copy and paste it over to this, I made sure to transpose these. So we're gonna do exactly the same thing. Since it now is a long format, we're gonna put it back into the wider format here. Boom. So we got here. So I don't think we need these anymore. And then let's make sure to see all at once. Yeah, look at how clean it is. Like we don't have to see Twitter every single time. We don't have to see sort of repeating names happening in the columns, and also just long sort of negative, positive, everything getting spelled out. So this is usually what sort of executives prefer if they want to handle the data themselves. Make sure that you clean them up nicely, and make sure that they are sort of executive ready, even the column names and everything before and after you actually clean up the data. A couple of things we're gonna do here after this is I think everything seems to be fine. So before I dive into this, what actually matters in the movie industry is um, especially Twitter volumes or the search that we handled last time. Any of the digital metrics tend to spike when we release trailers, especially the first trailer. So just think about like Avengers. Nobody knows anything about it. People are talking about it, but in the normal sense, as in there's some chatters and rumors about the movie or blah blah blah. When people actually start talking about the movie is when the trailer comes out. So in our data, we should be able to handle that and say, there's a trailer, and then identifying that sort of peak that happens with the trailer, saying this is sort of trailer 1 week period, and then to compare that fairly across the comms. So that's what we're going to do in this case. I did bring in the attributes tab into this to make sure that we have the sort of lookup values. So let's bring in our trailer data. So trailer 1 day, and again, there can be second, third, fourth trailer from like one movie, but what's important is the first movie. The first one is the landing gear, what we call the splash. It or earthquake sometimes in our marketing language. Um, it's extremely important. So let's bring the data in. So if we look up this case, our lookup value, it could be anything unique. So title name or title IMDb ID, but just the best practice is using the actual tag, not the title name, because in some cases the name could be wrong. So in UK or something, they could literally spell it black phone, comma, it happens a lot. So just make sure that you use you know, the unique identifier, not just something that has been spelled out like a title name. So in our case, is this table array. We're gonna be bringing in this. Just include up to whatever we need, which is our trailer one date right here. And then column index number. So that's from A to K. I think that's about 11. Let's see. That seems to be correct. It's coming through. So the black phone trailer one date is to October 13th, 2021. October 2021 for the black phone. And that is correct. And let's copy them over. And if you immediately realize what the issue is underneath this and then it's showing wrong dates and null values, you are intermediate Excel user. So congratulations. Yeah, so the actual problem here is just adding the dollar signs just to make sure that we're looking at the right attribute. So when you look at the null value here, so let's look at this. It's referring from A7 to K12. That's a wrong range. That's out of the scope right here. So it's pretty simple fix. I think everybody knows. Just using the dollar sign will fix the value and column instead. In this case, we're specifying literally the actual cells here. And the one thing that we're gonna fix one more time is also make sure the range lookup parameter is set. So if you do true here, it's going to look up the approximate match. Even if not everything is entirely matching, it's going to look up other things and just bring it the closest answer to possible. But in this case, we want the exact match for it because the title IMDb code is not going to be different unless there's some data problems. But in this case, there's no data problem. So we're going to go with false. We're doing the exact match. All right. So let's copy all those over. And let's see. Yep, that seems to be all in place. That looks pretty good. Next one is what we're gonna do is called a trailer flag. We brought the date over for a reason. In this case, we want to see what really matters is the day that you launch the trailer is, of course, the most impactful day. And you're gonna see the biggest metric possible. You see an Avengers trailer or horror movie trailer that you've been excited for, boom, you're gonna search for it, and they're gonna be blasting those through social media. So you're gonna be getting a whole bunch of Twitter responses, search, people chatting about it. Um, but the volume eventually dies down. The trailer doesn't last forever, and that usually is a 7-day mark, a week from the trailer launch date. So what we're gonna do here is making sure that things are living in the trailer window. So anything that happens from the trailer one date from the title to the 7-day mark, it's gonna be called trailer. But anything that outside of that parameter is just gonna be called regular or campaign or something like that. So let's craft that if function right here. So since we're gonna be using two conditions technically, let's make sure to start with end right here, and the two parentheses just to make sure. And then D2 is date of data, and then Q2 is our release trailer release date. Let's make sure this is equal to or greater than 0 because that will be date of, and then bigger than that. And then the second thing is D2 to Q2. And then this has to be less than 7 because if we're capturing day 0 as first day, the last 7th day mark will be 6th day. So it has to be less than 7. So wrap that in parentheses. And then we could call this trailer 1 but I would say let's avoid that to make sure it's not using the same column name as this. It's not for right now, but later on down the road, when you put in the SQL, Tableau, and everything that you sort of do the data processing wise, it's sort of the best practice to not match the column name or cell name into row name or something like that. So let's do first trailer instead. And then we're going to call the rest regular. Now it's missing right here. Right, that seems to be good and regular. And copy those over. At a glance, it seems to be okay. Let's take a look right here. So this date is matching this date, and then we have a count of 4, 5, 6, 7, which is perfect. But it doesn't hurt to double check in the case that we're using this data for. So since we checked the black phone already, let's look at Megan and organize this by, it's already sorted by the days of release. Whereas the trailer, there seems to be no data coming through before the movie released the first trailer, which is fine. It's pretty common. So they the data and the trailer dates are matching. There are 7 days consistently. That's okay. And then let's make sure one more title, maybe Smile. Yeah, no chatter leading up to it because who's gonna be looking up horror movie called Smile um, when there's no rumors or anything about it, and it's based on sort of not based on any comic book or anything. So there will be no chatter. So you can see the spike right happening with the launch of the first trailer, which is matching, and there's count of 7. Just a quick tip, and I'm sure a lot of you know, but instead of counting down, sometimes it's when you click a lot of different things. There's a little quick looking that you guys get take a look at and just does the calculation for you sometimes. If it's actual values of things, it does the average and count and sum. So it's really helpful. You don't need to do, you know, type in the sum of these, O to whatever. Instead, you can just quickly select and look. So that's the quickest way, and it's a small little tip. So the data seems to be okay. So we properly set the trailer flag, which is going to be really helpful for our analysis later on. One more thing that we're going to do when it comes to sort of the data manipulation, and let's make sure to unfilter everything since we want to see all the data and do it across the board, is actually relative week. What we have here is days to release, just looking at everything when it comes just on the daily value. So 270 days away from the release, 274 days, 10 days, 0 days. Um, we like to group these things up at our studio, and I think everybody else does exactly the same thing. We want to look at a week level, not a day level. So we're going to create that value, and let's call this thing relative week. And then how we're going to do this, it's going to be very simple. This date divided by 7. Then we get something like this, right? But what's important is that we gotta, it cannot fall into negative 39.3 days, 3 week. It does not make sense. So this has to be an integer with no decimal points. So we're gonna round this up in our case. And then 0 decimal. We do not want to see any decimal over here. So it's a week negative 40. So we're going to apply this across the board everywhere. And it seems to be pretty okay. It always has to have about 7 days in it. You cannot see sort of clearly because all the titles are sort of mingled right here. But if you just look at it right here, again, if you just look at these, this count of 7, which is perfect. We only want to see 7 days in a week. I think that pattern repeats right here, and I'm sure that applied correctly across the board. Yeah, the data goes on for really long. I did not know that when I was generating this sample data, it was going all the way up to week 18 after the release. So That's sort of helpful to have, but we're probably going to be trimming those things later down the road. And what we're going to be doing also for Excel's sake, Excel is not good at filtering using the relative weeks in a lot of cases, meaning any type of continuous values you want to see. Let's say you create a chart and you want to see between T39 to like T10, which is relative week 39 to relative week -10. Um, it does not really have a clean way of doing so. So what we're gonna do is label these relative weeks. So relative week label. And then we're gonna do sort of multi-layer if function here. So if first one will be if this the relative week is less than 8. So anything more than 8 weeks before the release, it would be called far. It's just because there's nothing much besides the trailer, anything outside of 8 weeks before the release, nothing really happens. So we're just gonna call this far, and it's just good to know. And if you were to work in the media entertainment industry, you want to bring something up in terms of the topic, you know not to bring up or talk about certain things just because it's people don't really care. It's not the core campaign, what we call period of time. And then we're gonna insert another if function here, which is in case that is not the case. When this first case is false, then it will fall into this if function. So if again s2 is equal or less than 0, we're gonna call this pre-release. And then anything outside of that, which is anything bigger than 0, is called post-release. Make sure that I think is just the issue of parentheses. Let's just make sure that. Yep, there we go. And then boom, let's copy those over. Um, we don't need to filter things by any chance to check this just because everything is sorted by the release, the days to release anyways. Let's just make sure that at the T8, everything changes. Yep, it does change right here. It's called pre-release all the way till the week 1. It's going to call post-release. And this is going to be helpful for our analysis because we're going to be looking at the data from the point of sort of what, you know, how much of a volume actually happens from far, how much volume happens actually in the pre-release window and in the post-release window. So there comes our label. So we created that. We created relative week, trailer flags, and then we cleaned up some of these data in the column names and then title IMDb ID. So next, what we're going to be doing is building up sort of mini dashboard. And what this mini dashboard has, it has a lot of charts. So like we did last time when we were looking at the search data, let's make sure to look at some data trends through a pivot table. And from the pivot table, we're going to be building some charts and into a dashboard. So let's jump right in.